The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. With that, we will call this regular council meeting for July 2nd, 2024 to order. Adoption of the agenda. Council, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening? Administration, any additions or deletions to the agenda? CO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. There are none from administration.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Council? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that we adopt the regular council meeting agenda for July 2nd, 2024 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. And Council, the motion on the floor is that Council adopt the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And Councillor Ostashik voting in favor by hand. That motion is carried unanimously. Next up is council minutes for adoption. Councillors? Councillor Haas.
I'd like to move that we accept the minutes of council for the regular council meeting of June 18th, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is that council adopt the minutes from the regular council meeting of June 18th, 2024. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Ostashik voting in favor by hand, and that motion is carried unanimously. That will take us to section 4 of our agenda, Citizens Minute with Council. Minute with Council provides an opportunity where residents can address council regarding issues, events, celebrations, or concerns. To ensure a constructive and welcoming environment, please adhere to the following guidelines. Keep your remarks concise, limited to 1 minute. Address the chair of the meeting when speaking to council. Avoid asking questions as this is not a Q&A session, and maintain a respectful tone and language. First up for Minute with Council today is Mr. Rob Daru from the Wild Mountain Music Festival.
Well, Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm here to represent Wild Mountain and their board in regards to what's happening. I'm not here to complain. I'm actually here to say to the council, we really appreciate how you guys have handled it the last couple of years. You guys have stepped forward. It's been a little bit of a process, but it's come along. So it's time somebody thanked you guys instead of complaining to you guys all the time. So thank you very much. In regards to Jordan, your staff, you've had a couple members that have really helped us out, like Deb and Dawn. Without them, it doesn't work. So thank them for me. I appreciate it. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of heads up, Mr. Mayor, you haven't been around here too long, so I don't know if you know too much about the festival. The society has been around for 19 years. First year to get going. We lost 2 years because of COVID. So there was this is the 16th year. We have 65 community sponsors that supply material. Some of them are on council. We have coordinators that are on council that come and help. They supply things like generators, fixing stuff, you name it, clean porta toilets. This thing has really grown as far as sponsorship is concerned, which just goes to show you what kind of community we live in. Without them and without you guys, it doesn't work. We would fail. We're trying to expand, just so you get an idea. We have one of our sponsors that's based in Houston, Texas, and he gives good money. He has an office in Edmonton and an office in Grand Prairie. He sends his staff out here from Alberta to the festival. I mean, we have other sponsors from Edmonton that send their staff out. So it's growing. And I think people need to know that we're expanding and it's getting better. We had an interview with Global. We sent a couple of board members down there to take care of it. we had an uptick in ticket sales right after that, big time. It was people coming from Edmonton. This year we'll have Travel Alberta show up. They found out about us because we're kind of a little hidden gem, right? And they're going to be there for 3 days doing a shoot around Hinton and around the festival. So it's all good news. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you've been out there. So I'm going to give you a personal invitation to come out any one of the days on the weekend. Ask for me or any one of my cohorts. We'll take you around. We'll show you what it's all about so you understand what's going on. Because I understand you've only been here for 2 years or 3 years. I'm not worried about council. I see them all the time. Okay. They're really well informed and they know what's going on. So
Excellent.
you will see business people out there, sponsors that have a black gold band on that say sponsor. Those are all business communities here in town that sponsor the festival. And at the same time, it's their staff and them that keep it going. So that's all I got to say. And again, thank you guys. And I know there's a few missing, but they work with us anyway, so it's okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daru.
Yeah, and we'll see you out there. No excuses.
I'll take you up on it.
Thanks, guys.
Next up, we have Miss Kate Cardinal.
I have for you my traditional tobacco offering, Kinnikinnick. I'd like to thank you for honoring our territory. We appreciate it. And I'd like to offer our condolences to Mr. Albert Ostashuk for your father's passing. We know that he's in good hands. Today, I'd just like to offer a prayer for our community. So, thank you. Hi, Creator. Hi, for leading us from our hearts to honor and respect all of creation, from every plant and animal and human being, our water, and all life. Hi. We ask for your love and your guidance from our hearts to honor and respect each other, love one another each and every day. As individuals, a community, and a nation. Hi. We also ask for your love and your guidance to always remember to respect our individual rights and freedoms as individuals, as a community, and our nation. Hi. Kisagitin. Hi. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cardinal. Now will take us to section 5 of the agenda, delegations and presentations. And CEO Panasic, you can confirm there are no delegations and presentations today. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Now we will move into a closed session to discuss the appointments to the Beaver Boardwalk Oversight Committee. Councilors? We'll need a motion. Thank you. Councilor Hawes.
I'd like to move that we go into closed session, please.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is that council move into closed session at 4:08 PM. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And Councilor Magoon voting in favor by hand, and that is carried unanimously. For those of you not coming into closed session, we'll probably be back in 3 minutes. Thank you. And with that, we will return to our regular council meeting for July 2nd, 2024. We are currently at section 7 of our agenda, action items, and item 7.1, appointments to the Beaver Boardwalk Oversight Committee. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'm recommending that council appoint Kelly Armstrong to the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee as the Indigenous representative for a 2-year term.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take the recommended action, please.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillors, the motion on the floor is that council appoint Kelly Armstrong to the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee as the Indigenous representative for a 2-year term. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I would also like to recommend that council appoint Miss Julie Carr to the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee as a resident at large for a 2-year term.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council proceed as recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council appoint Julie Carr to the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee as a resident at large for a 2-year term. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 7.1 on the agenda today? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 7.2, CAO Performance Review Policy CL1111 and CAO Oversight Committee Terms of Reference. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I will turn this over to Ms. Hope.
Thank you, Ms. Hope.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everyone. So in 2024, we had a review process for the CAO utilizing the policy, and we received some feedback from council, the CAO, and the consultant on how to make the process a little more understandable and a little more efficient. So that's what you see in front of you. The major changes is that a lot of redundant language was removed, and as well as some redundant review steps. There is a static review timeline, which replaces the previous timeline. And we removed the quarterly CAO reviews as they became redundant with the regularly reoccurring mutual performance agenda items. And now there's just a biannual CAO goal review. So if you have any questions, I am here.
Thank you, Ms. Hope. Council? Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, my computer's a little slow. I'd like to move that council approves the CAO Performance Review Policy CL1111 as presented, and the council approves the CAO Oversight Committee Terms of Reference as presented, if I can speak to it real quickly.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate, there's a lot, the redundancy obviously is moved. Thank you. And for taking the recommendations, I appreciate this year. We did things a little bit differently, bringing a consultant, which I think was a great move on the committee's part, because then we get their feedback, plus also from the committee as well. And the fact that the questions changed, I really appreciate that. It's a little clearer that way as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is the council approves the CAO Performance Review Policy CL1111 as presented, and the council approves the CAO Oversight Committee Terms of Reference as presented. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 7.2 on our agenda today? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 7.3, Northwest Alberta Emergency Resource Agreement. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I will turn this over to Mr. DeBodrop.
Thank you, CAO. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. Today I'm presenting for council a request for decision with the recommendation that council accepts the Northwest Alberta Emergency Resource Agreement. This agreement has been in place since 2016. It started in the town of High Level and the surrounding area and it has since grown quite a bit and encompasses the entire northwest corner of Alberta from Highway 16 north and west of Edmonton. There are 35 signatory municipalities in this agreement, including our immediate neighbors in Jasper, Edson, and the MD of Greenview. The benefits of this to Hinton in signing on to this agreement with other municipalities in Northwest Alberta would be to gain access to training opportunities and emergency support from other municipal emergency management professionals who could, when required, be deployed to Hinton. And conversely, we could be deployed to their municipalities through a predetermined mutual aid agreement. Another benefit is that we gain knowledge, experience, and the familiarity with emergency management personnel and what equipment and other resources could be made available to us in the event of a large-scale incident. Technically, Hinton falls into the Alberta Emergency Management North Central region, which includes the city of Edmonton and the capital region. Experiences over the last few years has taught us the types of hazards and potentially ultimately the types of resources required more aligned to the communities in Northwest Alberta and their incident management teams. I hear sirens. Sorry. These communities like us are equipped and trained to deal with situations unique to the communities our size and in remote locations. And because of our unique geographic location, appropriate resources being deployed from Northwest Alberta would arrive on a timeline similar to resources coming from the capital region. This agreement would not preclude us from the North Central regional resources or any other mutual aid agreement we have entered into. If council agrees with the recommended action, we would simply need to provide a letter from the CAO on town letterhead indicating the resolution of council, which would be sent to the town of High Level, who manages this agreement. And with that, if there are any questions, be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Chief DeBodrap. Council? Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No questions. I would like to make the motion of the recommended action. Like to move that council agrees to enter into the Northwest Alberta Emergency Resource Agreement. If I could speak to it quickly.
Yes, please.
I think this is a valuable coalition of communities, and I'm always pleased when I see this kind of initiative come forward and that we join part of it. It only makes sense if our community can partner with other communities to provide emergency response and in a timely way to help our neighboring communities and have that assistance reciprocated if we ever need it. So I think it's a great initiative and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council agrees to enter into the Northwest Alberta Emergency Resource Agreement. Councilor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be in support of this. I guess my only question, communities that aren't part of this, how do they, because I was actually kind of shocked Yellowhead County is not in this. They've seen a lot over the last couple of years, at least, with emergency in their area, and they're not part of this. But how does that work when a community is not, or a county is not part of this list in regards to receiving services?
Chief DeBodrap.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Communities like Yellowhead can sign on with other agreements, and they are part of the North Central region with Alberta Emergency Management Agency.
Okay.
So they can have access to the same resources we have. They just have not signed on yet to this agreement. They have been invited, to my understanding, to be a participant in this agreement, but that would be a decision of their council.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is that council agrees to enter into the Northwest Alberta Emergency Resource Agreement. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 7.3 on the agenda today? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 7.4, Hinton Healthcare Foundation Funding Agreement. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, to members of council. So the agreement that's presented in front of you today included as attachment 1 was in response to direction provided on June 18th to provide direction to administration to prepare a civic agency agreement with the Hinton Healthcare Foundation to support primary healthcare in the town of Hinton and return to a future meeting of council. I would also note that on the June 18th meeting, council also declared a local healthcare crisis, citing the local primary care services reaching a critical breaking point. We in the town of Hinton used to have a robust complement of doctors of about 15. That has now been adjusted to about six full-time equivalent physicians. So included as attachment 1 is a contract or a civic agency agreement. I'll go through some of the substantial or the substance of the agreement for council. A 2-year term that would begin July 1st, which would be starting this month in 2024, concluding June 30th, 2026. That is for a full 2-year term. Council is responsible for approving the funding amount in the annual budget annually. The Hinton Healthcare Foundation is required to assume a governance role within the Hinton Medical Clinic. The funding is to be used for deficit funding of the operational budget of the clinic with limitations such as capital costs, amortization, depreciation, or any form of additional compensations to the physicians themselves. The Hinton Healthcare Foundation is responsible for working towards attracting and retaining more healthcare professionals as a part of their role within this agreement. The Hinton Healthcare Foundation agrees to work in partnership with the town to undertake advocacy efforts focused on increasing healthcare professionals in the community. And the Healthcare Foundation is responsible for pursuing any additional funding that may come available in the future. A requirement to provide a report by December 31st, 2024 that would include a budget overview, financial control and management plan, operational control plan, physician agreement, risk management and contingency plan. And all of these items are some due diligence on our part that we thought was necessary just due to how quickly this thing has come together. And we did not have a lot of time to prepare these in advance for council's consideration. But we do understand that this is something that is acute and something that needs to happen quickly. So we are requiring some additional due diligence that has been agreed to by the Hinton Healthcare Foundation, and this agreement has been passed by the town's legal team. With that said, if there are any questions from council, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Council? Councilor Magoon.
I'll just make the recommended action, Mr. Mayor, that council approves the Hinton Healthcare Foundation funding agreement as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council approves the Hinton Healthcare Foundation funding agreement as presented. Now, as we move into discussion, I feel it's my responsibility to update council on some of the activities that have happened since we recently declared a local healthcare crisis due to a lack of healthcare professionals here in the town of Hinton. Since we've made that declaration, I've had a number of media interviews. As a result of those interviews, I've been contacted by a number of service providers in the primary care space, mostly in the alternate delivery model, so think virtual for the most part. I've also spoken with our MLA, Martin Long, as well as been in contact with the ministry. And I have every expectation that there's going to be some announcements in the coming weeks to months from the province regarding healthcare. Obviously, they're in a current restructuring, but the timeline on any of those changes is still not rapid enough to meet our immediate need, in my opinion. It's also been made clear through speaking with members of the general public and the people who contact me from hearing the media interviews that the public is not particularly well informed about what the changes to healthcare currently are And people who have lost their family doctor, especially people who have had a family doctor for their entire lives and are potentially retired or just unaccustomed to the situation that we're in, they don't know where to go. And there's communications problems out there. And so I think it's likely regardless of what we do with this decision, we need to communicate well with our community why we're making this decision. And I think that it would behoove us to communicate some of the alternative options for accessing primary care, what some of those options are. And so somewhere in this, I'm interested in a motion that might direct council to set up a town hall or information session with some primary care providers, maybe some of the HR teams or benefit teams from the big employers in town. I found out that even our town employees have access to a virtual healthcare provider through our benefit package, but it's not well known that that is the case. And getting that information into our community could really take the burden and the strain off of our system in this moment. So those are the updates I wanted to pass to council as we make this decision. Now we'll go to discussion on the motion that is that council approves the Hinton Healthcare Foundation funding agreement as presented. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only question to administration, and maybe I missed it, but typically with this amount of money, appointing a council member maybe to the board, I know we have retention committee, we have members on that, but are those the same board members that would be also linked to this agreement? Or is it necessary, or is it possible for another member of council or a member of council to be on the Healthcare Foundation board?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, we did not include council representative on the board. I'm not sure about the process when it comes to appointing members to this particular foundation. I could certainly look into that and bring that forward at a future date. I don't believe that it would preclude us from passing the agreement today. We could certainly bring that forward, and I think there's a mutual understanding between us and the Healthcare Foundation that this deal has come together very quickly, and that there's going to be a little bit of flexibility in working together over likely the next 6 months in order to get things where we want them to be. So if that's the will of council and we want to look at that possibility, we could take a look and bring that forward to a future meeting.
If I can just follow up.
Please.
Yeah, the reason for my question is because, I mean, we have other partners with less of a budget that we provide with representation on their boards. So I just think it might be prudent to consider that. And maybe that's something during our committee meet or during our organizational meeting in October to discuss prior to that. But I think that having someone now, again, because part of their role is also retention and finding other staff, those two members that are currently on there might fit that bill. I'm just not sure about that, but that's fine. We can talk about it later. I don't want to, delay this any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Any other discussion from council? I'll ask a question of the CAO then. In here, we've got two objectives in this agreement that I see. One is the stabilization of the medical clinic, and the other is attraction and retention. Is it the intent of this agreement to fund attraction and retention activities as it's been drawn up between administration and the Healthcare Foundation at this time?
Through the mayor to members of council, the primary goal of the agreement is to provide stopgap funding when it comes to the clinic operations. So for what we've approved in the dollar amount, that will be the vast majority of it. Within that, there are, I would say that there is likely some flexibility. We have incorporated some level of flexibility in the agreement. We are not overly prescriptive, other than it cannot go towards additional compensation. And that could come in a number of different forms that, for incentives and things like that we do not allow. But the primary goal for this is to provide the operational funding for the clinic, with the intent that would be that would attract more doctors to come here because you would have a reasonable overhead and be able to open up a profitable practice in town. So I wouldn't say that all forms of attraction and retention would be barred through this agreement, but I would say that the vast majority of it is slated towards operational deficit funding.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. And if I can follow up with another question, how does the CEO and administration feel about this agreement as it relates to our ability to collect relevant data for reporting and governance purposes on the oversight of this funding?
Through the mayor to members of council, administration is very comfortable with everything that we've put in place. They do have the obligations that all civic agencies would do, which would be a public presentation provided to council on what they've done, the progress that has been made. And we have also included as part of Schedule B, the additional conditions when it comes to a lot of that due diligence that would be provided by the end of this year. So I'm very comfortable with our level of oversight and our amount of due diligence that we've put in place through this agreement.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. And a procedural question from myself as the chair. The restrictions on voting on items only apply in terms of statutory hearings. Is that correct? Councillor Race could vote on this at this time, or is that prohibited in our procedure bylaws?
Through the mayor to members of council, no, Councillor Race certainly would be precluded from public hearing processes and not being a part of that, but this isn't a statutory public hearing as well as pecuniary interest. I don't believe Councillor Race would fit within either one of those. So I believe Councillor Race is open and likely obligated to vote on this matter.
Thank you very much, CEO Panasic, for confirming my memory on that. So, council, the motion on the floor is that council approves the Hinton Healthcare Foundation funding agreement as presented. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Councillor Race, I'll give you a few moments to catch up. So far the discussion has centered around the communications that I've had outgoing with the media since our declaration of the crisis. I provided an update on some primary care providers coming and potentially offering their services to the community and how these pieces of information need to be communicated. And then Councillor Ostashik and Councillor Haas both spoke in favor of this motion, knowing that in the discussions we've had with our MLA and the ministry, there are changes coming, but the immediacy of our need is today, and that's where we're at. Councillor Race.
Okay, I will be speaking in favor of this, but I do have a question for admin.
Absolutely.
So the information that I was reading, would we be giving half of the 250,000 this year?
CEO Panasic. Through the mayor to members of council, no, the request was for $500,000 per year because we have 6 months left. We looked at that as prorating it back to providing half this year. So 250,000 in 2024. In 2025, our obligations for this agreement would be the full 500. And in 2026, we would have an obligation to pay the last 250,000. So the total would be really $1 million contribution over a 2-year term. Now, because of the timing that this request has come in, it's not going to match up perfectly with our fiscal year end. It is what it is, but likely in 2026 or that budget process, council would need to make a decision on the remaining 6 months of that agreement as well. But for this year, we are proposing 250,000. We're proposing that come out of the operational reserve for this year, and then for it to be funded through the operational budget. And there's options that are available that we could discuss at that time on how we want to fund it, whether it be through taxation, reserve funding. That'll ultimately be up to council, but it is 250,000 from the operational reserve for 2024.
So here's my big question. In reading the report, it was, we will give them the money and they will need another additional couple months to kind of, get everything squared away and figure out how they're going to do this. And that's where I'm kind of uneasy, not having a plan moving forward. So what do the next 2 months look like?
Through the mayor to members of council, they have until the end of this year to provide the due diligence that has been provided as part of Schedule B. And that's a number of different reports and due diligence that we have outlined. So they have until the end of this year to get everything in place. And there is a lot to get in place with this type of relationship. So in the next 2 months, there will not be much in terms of this agreement that administration will be doing. We will be forwarding the funding as prescribed through the agreement, and that would likely be the extent of it.
Okay. So my only concern is when people say to me, what is this money going to be utilized for? I go, I actually really don't know. I think it'll go to pay wages, it'll go to pay utilities, monthly things. But I just feel foolish that I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Race. And I actually think that CEO Panasic has already spoken to that briefly, and perhaps he could recap what the intention of the money, or what the intention is to spend the money, or how it is.
Through the mayor to Councillor Race, so the intent of the agreement is to deficit fund the operational budget of the clinic. So the physicians will contribute a certain amount into the overhead of the clinic. The municipality or the town of Hinton would be contributing the deficit or the gap that is not funded through the physicians.
Thank you, CEO Panasic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of following up on the questions and comments regarding funding for this, moving forward, regardless of whether it's funded through the operating budget or split between that and reserves, it represents significant impact on the municipality's finances. I'm just looking to administration, should this pass this evening, what does administration have planned regarding communications to be able to communicate effectively to the citizens what this means for the community, what it might mean for their taxes, what it might mean for other plans, or things that reserves could potentially be used for otherwise if they're not used for this. I'd just like to know how that's going to be communicated.
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So we do have a communication plan related to this. So we have a number of different releases that, should council agree to this type of relationship, we are prepared to send out a number of different communications about the impacts. And I think the big thing is the reason why behind some of the decisions that may not be well known within the community. So we will be sure to provide that information through those releases, including the fact that this is a substantial amount of dollars that the municipality is providing to the healthcare foundation and to medical services, and the fact that it is not our responsibility, but something that is, dire enough that we saw the need to step up when needed. So all of that will be included in the press releases and the public releases that we have scheduled to come out soon after this meeting or this decision.
Thank you. If I could follow up quickly.
Go right ahead.
I appreciate that very much. I think it's important that fulsome information regarding why this is happening, what the impacts are, and why we as a municipality, I shouldn't speak for everybody, for myself though, at least, I almost feel obligated to commit town resources to step up to fill the void that's not being filled by the province. And I think it's important that that's communicated openly, honestly, and without any massaging and without any kind of whitewashing of it. I think it needs to be stated plain and true. We're doing this to make sure that our citizens are protected. They've got access to medical services, and it's because the province is dropping the ball. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, I'll remind us all that the motion on the floor is that council approves the Hinton Healthcare Foundation funding agreement as presented. Any further discussion from council? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. The council approves the Hinton Healthcare Foundation funding agreement as presented. Councilors, please vote now. Councilor Race voting in favor by hand, and that motion is carried unanimously. And at this time, we will take a 10-minute recess. And if I could see Jen and Jordan in my office quickly, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And we will bring back our regular council meeting for July 2nd, 2024 back to order. We're just waiting on our secretary to type up a motion. As a reminder, we're still on item 7.4 of our agenda this evening, the Hinton Healthcare Foundation funding agreement. Okay, so council, the motion that's on our screen is a motion I would like to recommend to council. And if council doesn't see fit to move it themselves, I am prepared to move it myself. But this is what I think is necessary based on my discussions with the province, with our community. I think we need to do better on communication, and I think that we need to help our residents find the right way to access healthcare for them, given our current situation. So, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to make the motion. I'd like to move the council direct administration to set up a town hall that outlines alternate access options for primary care, and to invite MLA Long and Minister LaGrange to discuss provincial action to address the healthcare crisis to occur by mid-August to mid-September. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to set up a town hall that outlines alternate access options for primary care, and to invite MLA Long and Minister LaGrange to discuss provincial action to address the healthcare crisis to occur by mid-August to mid-September 2024. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am in favor of the proposed motion. However, I do have a question. Mid-August, mid-September, that's quite a ways down the road. In terms of primary care options, is there anything that can be done in the interim to get information out to citizens? Again, I'm disappointed that if these options are available, the province isn't doing something to promote them, because there's no way that they don't know that the state of the provincial healthcare. That said, though, is there anything we can do in the interim to get that information out there, so any citizens who may be looking and may be confused and concerned and don't know where to reach out to for primary care could get some of that information sooner than 45 to 65 days from now?
Thank you, Councillor Stashik, for the question, and perhaps I'll get CEO Panasic to speak to administrative capacity, but given the priorities of council, my understanding is we need to get the agreement with the Healthcare Foundation done, and that is taxing our capacity at administration, and that mid-August was as soon as they were going to be able to get things prepared. Additionally, speaking to the provincial government, scheduling wise, mid-August is the earliest that an invite would be entertained.
Or if I could follow up, just to clarify, I'm not talking about moving this forward. I'm just talking about getting some information about options for primary care. other than the people that are a bit lost right now without the family doctors and without the ability to book clinic access. If there's options out there, could we communicate that somehow?
Understood. CO Panasic?
Through the mayor to members of council. Yes, we certainly can do that as a part of our communication strategy on this. One of the first steps that we're going to have to do is some research into what other options are available. And we're going to have to know that prior to booking. And this was set, in large part because if we do want to invite the care providers, members of the government, we do want to give them a little bit of leadway, but we will have to have that information of what options are available prior to even starting to book this and starting to make the logistical arrangements for it. So absolutely, once we have that information, there's no need for us to sit on that until we have a town hall. We can provide that when we have it as a part of our communication strategy.
Great. Thank you,
Follow-up?
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hawes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess, yeah, my question is around the options as well. And the reason for my question, during our seniors week, for example, there was a presentation made by one of our local pharmacists, and they explained a lot of their duties and how it's changed and how they can provide some duties that a lot of people weren't aware of. So is that going to be like, maybe that's something we can do in the interim, maybe talking to the pharmacists and seeing what they can do and trying to get some of that education out there. But is that something that also we could include in these options and when we bring a town hall to invite the pharmacists out too, because their roles have drastically changed, and they can provide some services that doctors can provide too, but they can provide as well. So whether it's lab work and other things like that. But is that something that we could also do?
CO Panasic?
Through the mayor to Councillor Hawes, I think that's a fantastic idea. I've made a note and we'll ensure that we make sure that the pharmacists are part of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Race?
Thank you, sir. So my one question was, who's going to come up with these alternate options? And CEO has answered that question. Next question, are you proposing Zoom or in-person meeting with MLA Long and LaGrange?
I would like to invite them in person myself, but we all know how that goes. So we'll take what we can get.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from council? Okay, council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to set up a town hall that outlines alternate access options for primary care and to invite MLA Long and Minister LaGrange to discuss provincial action to address the healthcare crisis to occur by mid-August to mid-September 2024. Seeing no further discussion, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Race voting in favor by hand. And that motion is carried unanimously. Does council have anything further for item 7.4 on the agenda today? Seeing nothing, we'll move to section 8 of the agenda, information items, and 8.1, financial reports status. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I will turn this over to Ms. Bourbeau.
Thank you, members of council. So included in your agenda package this week was a financial status report broken down into two sections, the operating and the capital. On the operating side, administration at this point in time doesn't see any flags or any areas of concern. We did take the liberty of booking all of the depreciation and anticipating the future debentures that were going to be coming out, as well as doing all of the transfers to reserves prior to preparing this report. And that was done to reduce the fluctuations that council would see on the reports as we go throughout the year. And on the capital side, I just, prior to any questions, on page 103, I missed removing a percentage on the Switzer Station slope failure and storm outlet repair. It's noted as not started and 100% complete. I'm just wanting to clarify that it is not started. So with that, I'll take any questions from council on the status reports.
Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. Council. Counselor Hawes.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question on the signage at the rec center. I see some work starting to be done there, so I'm assuming that an RFP has been done. I'm just curious on the I think I see the boiler, but I'm trying to find the rec center sign. Oh, there it is. 25%.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. Thank you, Counselor Hawes. Council is interested in accepting this report for information, perhaps? Counselor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council accept the financial status report for information.
Thank you, Counselor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council accept the financial status report for information. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. Counselor Race voting in favor by hand, and that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 8.1 on the agenda? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 8.2, Town of Hinton Housing Options Report. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So I did include the housing options survey that we went out for public engagement, I believe at the beginning of May. So I just wanted to include this in the package to get the information out there. My intent is that we will provide a report and we will continue on with this discussion armed with some public feedback on housing and housing related policies at the next committee of the whole. But I did want to just provide this to council and to the public so you had time to consider prior to having any discussion on policy.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. And given the way this has been presented, do you require us to accept for information or can we move on?
Through the mayor, if you could just make a motion to accept the report for information, that would be great.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Counselor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when you provide us information at the next committee meeting, will you be giving us locations like infill that is available to us? Any lands that we own?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, no, we've looked at that as a separate initiative, so that work is ongoing. This was really separate separate on the policy side and what you could do from a regulatory standpoint to encourage housing in Hinton. We are working on an infill strategy that includes what do we want to do with town-owned land and what could we do and how do we use that asset in order to encourage housing and other development. We're also, working and we hope in July or this month to provide some information about some direct initiatives options that we could look at when it comes to the Bhutan land. So all that work is ongoing, but this is a little bit separate, specific to affordable and entry level housing and what we could do from a regulatory standpoint to achieve council strategic goals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Race. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Counselor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for administration. If this report is accepted as information today, what happens with it moving forward? What are next steps to address some of the concerns that are brought about in the survey results and as well as something to strategize some of the housing options in the report?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So we are preparing a report for the next committee of the whole meeting. This report will make up part of that as the information that's really driving that, as well as the housing options report that starts on page 106. So all that information that you have here will be available at the next committee of the whole meeting to help inform that discussion. And then but it'll be the beginning of that policy related discussion on housing. This information will continue to inform that strategy and what we want to do going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Ostashik. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Any further questions from council? Seeing nothing, can we get a motion to accept for information? Counselor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we accept the Town of Hinton Housing Options Report for information.
Thank you, Counselor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council accepts the Hinton Housing Options Report for information. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. Counselor Race voting in favor by hand. And Counselor Ostashik voting in favor by hand, and that is carried unanimously. This will take us to section 9 of the agenda today, correspondence, and 9.1, our correspondence package. Council, any discussion on the correspondence package, or would we like to accept for information? Oh, CO Panasic has something.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight that we have received 4.99 million for the Alberta Municipal Water Wastewater Partnership for some of our upstream water infrastructure work that is slated to happen likely sometime in 2025, as well as an additional grant of 913,842 for the Switzer Drive asphalt rehabilitation project. So we're very happy that we got some good news on our infrastructure funding.
Thank you for that, CO Panasic. Council is still looking for, there's no questions, accepting the correspondence for information. Thank you, Councilor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council accept correspondence for the July 2nd, 2024 regular council meeting as information.
Thank you, Councilor Ostashik. Council, the motion on the floor is the council accept the correspondence for information. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. Councilor Race voting in favor by hand. And that motion is carried unanimously. CEO, do we have any notices of motion this evening?
No, we do not.
That will take us to section 11, reporting and council reports. Councilor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything formal to report, other than I did take in some of the Canada Day events that happened over the weekend. Was down at Gordon Moore Park on Canada Day and saw some of the on-stage entertainment and took in some of the vendors. It was nice to see there was a good turnout, lots of people. The main thing though that I wanted to talk about from Canada Day was the drone show that happened on the eve of Canada Day. The turnout for it was amazing. I could not believe how many people were there. It was packed at Gordon Moore Park, and everybody I talked to thought the drones were a hit. Positive reviews from everyone that I talked to, including myself and people and the family and friends that I was with. I thought the drone show was great and a perfectly adequate and in many ways superior replacement for fireworks. So I would look to council to consider that being an addition moving forward rather than fireworks. I think there's many advantages to having a drone show over fireworks. So I look forward to discussing that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ostashik. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We also attended the Canada Day festivities. I won't rehash anything, but it was a great time and I appreciate all the time and energy that went into preparing it by all of our staff in the town. It was awesome. I attended the Protective Services Committee meeting on June the 19th. With our RCMP update, there's actually been a reduction in property crime this quarter. And in fact, there was a sizable return of over $75,000 in property with essentially a seizing of stolen property in the community. Currently, we have one vacant position, a couple members on medical, one on an administrative leave. With that, it's worth noting that we are not always running 24-hour coverage right now, but a third short. of what we traditionally in the past had been. And so that's something for council to consider as we move forward. Our staff sergeant is starting with some monthly messaging. You'll see in the newspaper, social media, and the RCMP is beginning a positive ticket campaign. $10 each to our youth in the community for doing awesome things. Chief DeBodrat, he had mentioned that we're going to be looking at a fire bylaw update coming up soon, maybe before September, but it's going to be much more Hinton focused, as opposed to in the chief's words, you know, those cut and paste bylaws where we tend to see them just dropped in our laps. You know, with other communities, they sort of take what's good from one community and move it into another. Also, we're likely to see an animal control update by October. And then we did see this evening the large agreement involving over 25 other member communities. There's going to be some highway bypass vegetation management work coming up soon. And then we are also expecting to see the short-term rentals enforcement and review coming up sometime here in July. And that is about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Ostashik has a question, perhaps.
I do have a question. Sorry, the short-term rentals review, what was that? You said it's coming in July?
Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, I may ask our CAO or the chief to speak to that. Thank you.
CEO Banasek.
Thank you, through the mayor to members of council. So short-term rentals was identified as one of the options that council could pursue for policy-related initiatives that was identified in the original report. So that report will be going forward to the committee of the whole meeting. So it is there. It's packaged with a lot of other policy options that could be looked at as well.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing really to report. I just want to echo some of what Councillor Stashik said. The Canada Day celebration went very well. But I too heard nothing but good response with the drones. And I do look forward that, administration look at the future of the drones being in replacement of the fireworks. People just talked about how much it was easier to visit with people. Kids weren't crying because it was too loud. And the dogs really liked it as well. So, but yeah, it was a great performance and looking forward to the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Race.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So last week we were invited by the Chamber of Commerce to visit with 125 international students down at the Hinton Center. I met with, I don't know how many, but they were the happiest students I have ever met with, I think. It was the first time ever that that school has brought students out this way. They'd like to make it a yearly event. There were students there who had completed their studies, and then students there that had one more term left. And I also attended the youth session, and it was the last session that we were having until September. So a busy week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. And for myself to add to the updates that have been going on, I attended a Northern Alberta Development Council outreach meeting last week. They were looking at, much like Travel Alberta, looking to assess the potential in the area. Last Wednesday, we had the town staff barbecue at Steve Hodgkiss Arena. That looked like a great event, and good job to administration putting that on. Have to put it with the firefighters. They put on a decent burger. Last Thursday was the Harry Collins grad, and we have a number of new fully graduated adults in our community. So congratulations to all of them. We also had a Attraction and Retention Committee meeting last week, and that is starting to finally get off the ground with an approved terms of reference. On Saturday was a swim meet that council actually supported through our community fund. We had 160 swimmers from the Alberta Swimming Association's Region B, all of them coming from out of town and staying in hotels and boosting our local economy. And I know that some of our local swimmers got to join the festivities as well, and hopefully they'll be able to bootstrap and reboot our existing or our previous Hinton swim team. On Sunday, we had the Gordon Moore Memorial Park Drone Show, and I will echo everything I've heard from council. No crying kids, dogs weren't terrified, and it was a great show. The only feedback I got was there was such a great turnout, such great weather. We could have had vendors there that night. And the car gate, we need to open that next year because the exit was complicated by a lack of exit space. Then Canada Day, of course, another great event, and thank you to administration for putting all of that on. Pancake breakfast was great. The cake cutting was great. The parade was fantastic. So that's all I have. CAO Panasic reporting.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing further to report.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. That will take us to the final item on our agenda, section 12, Councilor Stashik.
I'd like to move that council adjourn today's meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council adjourn the meeting at 5:21 p.m. Please vote now. Councilor Race voting in favor by hand. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council is adjourned for the evening. Thank you, everybody.